Hi, welcome back to Joe Blogs. In today's episode, I want to provide you with another update on the tension that's occurring between China and the Philippines in the area of water commonly known as the South China Sea, but referred to in the Philippines as the West Philippines Sea. And in the latest incident, the Chinese Coast Guard and other military vessels have fired water cannons on Philippines vessels in an unprovoked attack. And if you've been following the channel, you'll know that this is the latest in a series of incidents that have taken place. And these incidents are becoming more serious. There are more collisions getting involved. The China Coast Guard is now becoming more aggressive. And in terms of the potential for this situation to escalate into something much more serious, the USA has recently reinstated its joint patrols with the Philippines in all of these waters, which cover an area also close to Taiwan, which is very sensitive from China's point of view. China does not recognise Taiwan as being an independent country. However, Taiwan obviously has declared independence, and the USA is an ally of Taiwan, and as a result, we've now got tension rising directly between China and the USA on a number of different fronts. So in today's video, we'll have a look at some video footage that's been taken by the Philippines Coast Guard of the latest attacks by the Chinese vessels. We'll have a look at the official responses to this incident from the Philippines, China and the USA. I'll then provide you with some more information on the Scarborough Shoal and the disputed waters. And then finally today I'll wrap up with my summary as to whether or not I think there's any real potential of this situation escalating into something far more serious. But before we get started on all of that, once again, I'd like to say thank you so much to everybody that supported the channel. Really appreciate it. If you've bought me a coffee or sent me a YouTube super thanks or signed up as a member or a patron, thank you so much. It really does help me through those moments when you're thinking, is this all worth it? When I know that people are out there who are genuinely enjoying these videos and are supportive of the channel. So thanks very much. The Philippines Task Force said 3 Fisheries Bureau vessels were on a supply mission on Saturday to provide oil and groceries to more than 30 Filipino fishing vessels near the Scarborough Shoal when they came under fire from Chinese water cannons at least 8 times. A fisheries vessel was directly and deliberately targeted by the China Coast Guard, the task force said, causing damage to communication and navigation equipment. To prevent the distribution of humanitarian support is not only illegal but also inhumane, the task force said, adding that China deployed boats to drive away Filipino fishing vessels awaiting supply and to illegally install a floating barrier. Chinese maritime militia vessels were also reported to have engaged in dangerous manoeuvres and deployed a long-range acoustic device that resulted in temporary discomfort and incapacitation to some Filipino crew, the task force said. Philippine Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces, Romeo Brawner, said he was on board a vessel that was both sprayed with a water cannon and rammed. Brawner told Philippine radio that he was unhurt by the water cannon incident and that he does not believe that China knew he was on board the boat. This is a serious escalation on the part of the agents of the People's Republic of China, Jonathan Malaya, spokesperson of the National Security Council, said in a news conference where officials showed images and videos of both the water cannons and ramming. The Philippines has filed diplomatic protests and has summoned China's ambassador over its aggressive actions in the South China Sea, which a foreign ministry official said were a threat to peace, good order and security. In response to this latest incident, the National Task Force of the West Philippines Sea released the following statement on X. Today, the 10th of December 2023, China Coast Guard and Chinese maritime militia vessels harassed, blocked and executed dangerous manoeuvres on Philippine civilian supply vessels in another attempt to illegally impede or obstruct a routine resupply and rotation mission to BRP Sierra Madre at Evergrande Shoal, which is the Filipinian name for the Scarborough Shoal. China Coast Guard Vessel 5204 deployed a water cannon against the Philippine supply vessels, causing severe damage to ML Calavan's engines, disabling the vessel and seriously endangering the lives of its crew. Currently, Philippine Coast Guard vessel BRP Sidangan is safely towing the vessel back to Ulagan Bay. Additionally, BRP Cabra suffered damage to its mast after being directly targeted by the full strength of the water cannon of the China Coast Guard. The Philippine Coast Guard vessels and the resupply boats were subjected to reckless and dangerous harassment at close range by China's Coast Guard and China's maritime militia vessels on the approach to Evergrande Shoal. Contrary to China Coast Guard disinformation, supply boat Anisa May was rammed by the China Coast Guard 21556 vessel. Despite these extreme and reckless actions, the supply boat successfully reached BRP Sierra Madre, and resupply is ongoing at the time of this writing. The task force reiterates that Evergrande Shoal is a low tide elevation within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone and continental shelf, in accordance with UNCLOS and as upheld by the 2016 Arbitral Award. The Philippines exercises sovereign rights and jurisdiction over this feature. As a low tide elevation, Evergrande Shoal can neither be the subject of a sovereignty claim nor is it capable of appropriation under international law. China cannot lawfully exercise sovereignty over it. In this regard, the assertions of China that its actions in the vicinity of Evergrande Shoal are a legitimate exercise of law enforcement measures has no basis in international law. Further, we express grave concern over the deliberate disinformation conducted through official channels that distorts the facts on the ground. We condemn once again China's latest unprovoked acts of coercion and dangerous manoeuvres against a legitimate and routine Philippine rotation and resupply mission to Evergrande Shoal that has put the lives of our people at risk. The systematic and consistent manner in which the People's Republic of China carries out these illegal and irresponsible actions puts into question and significant doubt the sincerity of its calls for peaceful dialogue. Peace and stability cannot be achieved without due regard for the legitimate, well-established and legally settled rights of others. We demand that China demonstrates that it is a responsible and trustworthy member of the international community. The Philippines continues to act in accordance with international law, particularly UNCLOS and the 2016 Arbitral Award. The Philippines will not be deterred from exercising our legal rights over our maritime zones, including Evergrande Shoal, which forms part of our exclusive economic zone and continental shelf. In addition to this statement, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. posted on X, "The aggression and provocations perpetrated by the China Coast Guard and their Chinese maritime militia against our vessels and personnel over the weekend have only further steeled our determination to defend and protect our nation's sovereignty, sovereign rights and jurisdiction in the West Philippine Sea. I have been in constant communication with our national security and defence leadership and have directed our uniformed services to conduct their missions with the utmost regard for the safety of our personnel, yet proceed with a mission-orientated mindset. Let me reiterate what is settled and widely recognised. Evergrande Shoal is within our exclusive economic zone. Any foreign claim of sovereignty over this is baseless and absolutely contrary to international law. No one but the Philippines has a legitimate right or legal basis to operate anywhere in the West Philippine Sea. The illegal presence in our waters and dangerous actions against our citizens is an outright and blatant violation of international law and the rules-based international order. We remain undeterred." China's Coast Guard said the Philippine boat ignored warnings and deliberately collided with its vessel, which was sailing normally for law enforcement purposes. The responsibility lies entirely with the Philippines, the Coast Guard said in a statement. The Philippines should immediately stop its infringements and strictly control frontline provocations, China Coast Guard spokesman Gan Yu said on Weibo. The Chinese authorities will resolutely safeguard national sovereignty and maritime rights, he said. A commentary piece in China's official military newspaper urged the Philippines to immediately stop its violations, strictly control its provocative actions and refrain from shooting itself in the foot. It added that some hegemonic countries have resorted to instigating trouble, creating division and inciting confrontation in the South China Sea, and that those countries openly endorsed illegal infringement and provocation by the Philippines. It must be pointed out that the Philippines' actions are closely connected to the instigation and abatement of external forces, the PLA Daily said, without naming any country or government. Malaya says China's claims that the United States is fueling Philippines' audacity for provocation have no basis and reiterated that the United States was not involved in resupply missions. In a statement, the US State Department said, "The actions taken by China's ships around Second Thomas Shoal and Scarborough Reef reflect not only reckless disregard for the safety and livelihoods of Filipinos, but also for international law. The United States stand with our Philippine allies in the face of these dangerous and unlawful actions, it added as it reaffirmed the two nations' 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty. And the US Ambassador to the Philippines, Mary Kay Carlson, said in a post on X, the United States stands with the Philippines and partners in vehemently condemning the People's Republic of China's repeated illegal and dangerous actions against Philippines vessels, including disrupting the Philippines' resupply mission to the Sierra Madre today. PRC aggression undermines regional stability in the defiance of a free and open Indo-Pacific. The United States has called out China for interfering in the Philippines' maritime operations and undermining regional stability, and urged Beijing to stop its dangerous and destabilising conduct in the strategic waters. It reaffirmed its commitment to the Mutual Defence Pact between the two countries, Matthew Miller, State Department spokesman, said in a December the 10th statement.
The USS Gabrielle Giffords, seen here in Texas in 2017, is what the U.S. Navy calls an Independence-class littoral combat ship, which means it can operate closer to shorelines than other warships. And on Monday, China's military claimed the Gabrielle Giffords illegally entered waters adjacent to a disputed South China Sea atoll that has recently seen several maritime confrontations. A Chinese spokesperson said, quote, the U.S. seriously undermined regional peace and stability, adding that the U.S. disrupted the South China Sea and violated China's sovereignty. China is in disputes with several of its neighbors over its extensive claims of territorial waters in the South China Sea. The U.S. Navy said the USS Gabrielle Giffords was conducting routine operations in international waters in the South China Sea, consistent with international law. The Chinese military spokesperson said the U.S. ship was monitored and followed. The U.S. Navy responded, quote, we will not be deterred from continuing to work alongside our allies and partners in support of our shared vision for a free and open Indo-Pacific. In recent months, China has had several run-ins with Philippine vessels in the South China Sea. Over the weekend, the Philippine Coast Guard shared this video it says shows hundreds of Chinese maritime militia vessels gathering near a reef within Manila's exclusive economic zone. A Chinese foreign ministry spokesperson on Monday called the Chinese vessel's behavior, quote, responsible and lawful, and castigated the Philippines for what it said were, quote, irresponsible remarks.
Things are heating up between the Philippines and China in the South China Sea. At the center of tensions is the Scarborough Shoal, a ring-shaped island coveted for its bountiful fish stocks and stunning lagoon. It's located in the middle of the South China Sea, close to shipping lanes carrying an estimated $3.4 trillion of annual commerce. The shoal is about 125 miles off the Philippines and inside its exclusive economic zone. Both the Philippines and China lay claim to it, but no sovereignty has ever been established. It's been effectively under Beijing's control since China seized it in 2012. A landmark 2016 ruling by the Permanent Court of Arbitration largely went in favor of the Philippines, but it wasn't tasked with establishing sovereignty. The positioning of the shoal is strategic for Beijing, and there have been concerns China might build a man-made island there. During the pro-China former Duterte administration, it allowed Filipino fishing boats to operate near the shoal, but relations have deteriorated under President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. There have been minor altercations between the two elsewhere in the South China Sea this year. While Marcos may score points for standing up to Beijing, his Coast Guard is no match for China's. One deterrent, though, could be the United States. Earlier in the year, the U.S. gave the Philippines guidelines stating mutual defense commitments would be invoked over an attack anywhere in the South China Sea.
A dispute between China and the Philippines over a sunken warship has heated up. The warship, which dates back to World War II, is used by the Philippines as a military outpost. It was purposely grounded in 1999 to reinforce Manila's sovereignty claims in the Spratly archipelago. Beijing wants the ship to be towed away, but Manila remains defiant.
We continue to assert our territorial rights in the face of all of these challenges and consistent with the international law and UNCLOS especially.
China claims sovereignty over almost the entire South China Sea, which overlaps with the waters of Malaysia, Vietnam, Brunei, Taiwan and the Philippines. In response, China's foreign ministry released a statement reiterating its request for the warship to be removed, adding that its, quote, goodwill and sincerity on the issue had been ignored.
So what's the summary and conclusion today? Well, I wanted to post this video because we are now seeing repeated incidents of the Chinese Coast Guard and other Chinese vessels actually starting to attack Philippines vessels. Now, the incident that we looked at in today's video, obviously the attack was a water cannon. So they're not firing missiles or machine guns at this point. However, this is a direct form of aggression. The Chinese Coast Guard is clearly under direct instruction from the Chinese authorities that these waters are Chinese sovereign territory and therefore nobody should be allowed to do anything other than Chinese vessels. Now, as we've talked about in previous videos, there are internationally recognised laws that state who owns the waters outside of each country, and it's generally recognised that there is a 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone outside of every country in the world. So basically, nobody should be coming into the waters within 200 nautical miles of your land. And when you look at the body of water that's commonly referred to as the South China Sea, which is a huge expanse, China is only entitled to an area around 200 miles from its shores. However, China has completely disregarded that international law, drawn up its own map and said that it owns the vast majority of all of these waters, including water that's within 200 miles of the Philippines. Now, the Philippines have obviously objected to this situation and they actually went to the international courts. And in 2016, the international courts passed a ruling stating that China was operating illegally and that they did not have a sovereign right to the waters close to the Philippines. However, China has completely ignored that international ruling and it's carrying on defending what it sees as its territory. And that's what's causing the tension currently in the South China Sea. Now, the USA is not happy about this situation and they've come out and strongly supported the Philippines. And they are now starting to undertake joint patrols in the region to protect the Philippines' sovereign rights. But one of the problems that this has now thrown up is that some of those territorial waters that the Philippines are claiming are close to Taiwan. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, Taiwan is a disputed territory. If you know the history of China, you'll know that the former rulers of China actually fled to Taiwan at the time when Mao Zedong took over in the 1940s and subsequently declared the island to be an independent country. Now, the Chinese authorities have never recognised that and they believe that Taiwan remains an island that's part of China. So we've got an international dispute here. And as you may be aware from an economic perspective, Taiwan is one of the world's leading producers of microchips, which are important for everything these days. We've got microchips in virtually anything you can think of. So Taiwan is important globally in terms of what it's doing, and the USA is supportive of Taiwan being an independent country separate from China. So the potential for what's happening in the South China Sea to flare up into something more serious is a genuine risk, because China is unhappy that the USA is firstly supporting the Philippines and secondly could get drawn into the ongoing dispute between China and Taiwan. China is constantly undertaking military drills both on the water and in the air that Taiwan claims are breaching its sovereign waters and airspace. So alongside what's happening between the Philippines and China, we've also got rising tension between Taiwan and China, and the USA is standing behind both of these countries. Now, as it stands at the moment, the USA is not taking any form of aggressive action. It's literally just standing behind the two countries and helping them to defend what is legally theirs. But the real problem that exists here is that China doesn't recognise any of those territorial claims. Firstly, it doesn't recognise Taiwan as an independent country. It thinks it's part of China and so doesn't have any respect for Taiwan's borders. And secondly, from the Philippines' point of view, China is claiming most of the water in the South China Sea, including the waters that everybody else is recognising as being owned by the Philippines. So China's position is that what it's doing at the moment is defending its sovereign territory. The USA, the Philippines and Taiwan don't agree with that position, and so they've got an opposing territory that they claim is theirs, and that's where there is a genuine risk that tension could arise. Now, as things currently stand, it's unlikely that it will escalate into an actual military conflict. However, if China decides that it wants to ramp things up and instead of using water cannons, starts firing actual weapons at Philippines vessels and potentially sinks one of those vessels, then that will be the trigger point when we will see a response from the Philippines, and it would be very interesting to see what the USA's stance was at that point, whether or not they offer military support in a similar way to what they've done in Israel, where they've sent a warship and lots of troops into the area, not to actually fire any weapons, but just to be seen as supportive of what's going on in that situation. If the USA did that in the South China Sea, if they moved some vessels and some other military aircraft to support the Philippines, then that would seriously increase the tension in the region and could potentially lead to some form of military conflict, which would obviously be bad news for all parties involved and also for the global economy, because the last thing that we need at the moment are any more wars. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's video, you found it useful, informative and thought-provoking. If you've liked what I've said, then please give me a thumbs up. Thank you for watching this video all the way through to the end, and here's something to put a smile on your face.